What's up, guys? I'm here with Nick Mullery for another edition of Mobilize It. Nick's here from Metal Physio, and we're going to talk about some common back pain that everyone encounters from time to time. So Nick, take us through a couple of things that you encounter and what we can do for them.
All right, so when we see somebody hurt their back, there's generally 3 stages that we take them through before we get them back to doing what they're doing. The first one would be the acute stage, where the pain is pretty high, there's not much they're able to do. There's the middle stage, kind of in between, and then we have a later stage where they're going to return back to their sport or lifting or whatever it is they want to do.
All right, so what's the first thing you tend to do to assess any back pain?
So the first thing we're going to do is just kind of see how much motion that they have in their back, what kind of movements trigger that back pain, and then we're going to address those individual deficits and try to ease it back into what they're eventually going to do.
All right.
All right, so the first one we're going to do is you're going to lay down on your back. So these are called lower trunk rotations. What you're going to do is you're just going to rotate your knees from side to side. Okay, so you're going to go all the way that way, bring it all the way back this way. These we want to keep within a pain-free range, so if you start to feel some pain on one side, that's your indicator to stop and kind of come back the other way. This is a good way to loosen up the lower back in a rotational plane. I give these to people a lot for morning stiffness as well, so that'll be a good way to loosen the back up.
So is this a good way to do any sort of mobility? This would work even if you didn't have back pain, just to sort of...
Yep, this is just a good general way to loosen up the back. It generally feels good for the back, so if you're just dealing with any kind of nagging pain, it can help kind of reduce that a little bit.
All right, cool.
All right, so the next one we're going to do is called a seated pelvic tilt. So Joe, you could have a seat on the bench here. And I like to do these in seated so that you can feel the surface underneath you rolling as you're doing them. So what you're going to do is kind of arch your lower back like this and roll the bench away from you, and then you're going to reverse that motion and kind of let the bench roll back underneath you. Good, so we want to target the lower back area here in the pelvis, and you're just kind of tilting forward and rolling it back. That looks perfect right there. And the same rules kind of apply for this one too. So if you're starting to feel sensitivity in one direction or the other, you can just stop and reverse it. And doing a couple of those will help kind of loosen up the lower back as well. All right, Joe, so the next one we have is an active side bend with a QL stretch. The QL is a muscle in your back that often gets kind of stiff and irritated when people do have back pain. So the way we're going to set this up is if you're going to stretch your right side, what you're going to do is bring your right leg behind your left one. And then you're going to bring your right arm over your head. You can grab onto a rig or use a wall. This hand's going to kind of push your hip out and then bring it back in, just like that. Good. And if you're doing this properly, you should feel a stretch along the side of your back here. You can kind of play with angles to get the best stretch that you feel most comfortable with. All right, so the last one we got here in this acute phase is a prone press up. So what you're going to do is get on your stomach. You can kind of put your forearms on the ground initially to start. And from here, you're just going to push your upper body, your chest up off the ground while you keep your hips on the ground. So this way, we're working into spinal extension here. And this is a good way to kind of reduce pain initially as well. If this is starting to feel comfortable on your elbows, you can progress by putting your hands flat on the floor and pressing up that way. Like that, Joe. Nice.
How long do you hold it?
I would go just up and right back down like you're doing right now. That's a perfect tempo for this. Good?
Cool.
All right, so the first one we're going to do is kind of get the hip hinge movement back. So this phase is more about movement prep and kind of ingraining the movements that we're going to eventually return to first before we actually start adding load. First one, you're going to put the PVC behind your back. We're going to have 3 points of contact here. One's going to be the back of your head. The second one's going to be behind your shoulder blades. And the third one's going to be in the lower back right above your butt. So from here, you're going to get into a nice athletic stance, slight bend in the knees, with maintaining all points of contact with the PVC, hinge over, and then bring it back up. Good. So the PVC is here to cue a neutral spine as you're going through the hip hinge, which is a fundamental movement for most exercises. Nice job. All right, so now that we have our hip hinge down, we're going to apply that to a kettlebell deadlift. So we're going to elevate the surface a little bit just to keep you in a nice safe range here. You're going to set up the same way you would with a barbell, somewhere in the midfoot. You're going to hinge down, pick up the kettlebell, and bring it back up, just like you would be doing a deadlift. We're going to keep the kettlebell relatively light for this one and off a surface, just adding enough load to kind of prep those muscles in the lower back for the movements that are to come.
How many reps or sets would you do with them?
I would just start off with about 2 sets of 10. We could keep the reps pretty high and the weights pretty low just because we want to really get that movement pattern back in. Okay, so we're not really going so much for strength here, but more for technique.
Cool.
All right, so the next one we have is a loaded side bend. So you can pick the kettlebell back up, hold it in one hand at your side. What you're going to do is slowly let the kettlebell drop and then bring it back up to the center. Good. Here we're working the lateral muscles of the trunk, preparing them to begin stabilizing as we progress. So just kind of activating those muscles, getting used to some movement. Looks good.
We'll go a couple on this side. Do you ever see any weird movements from people who aren't comfortable with a little weight in their hand doing side bends? Like, do they slouch?
Yeah, so people who aren't comfortable, maybe it could be because of pain or just inflexibility, but they will compensate by kind of bending forward and flexing at the trunk rather than side bending, true side bending.
Yeah.
So I will cue that just to make sure we're working the muscles, the obliques and the QL that we want to target. All right, now to progress, we're going to do a suitcase carry. So holding the kettlebell in the same position at your side in one hand, we're just going to walk with it now. So we're going to keep a sustained contraction of the trunk, keeping it nice and stable as we're dynamically walking. As you turn, you can switch hands. And this time our trunk is working the entire time to stay nice and upright.
And this is better than both in the double suitcase carry, right?
Right, with an offset load rather, we're really working on the trunk to stay nice and stable. So if you have them in both hands, don't have to stabilize as much. One side, we're really working that trunk to keep nice and neutral.
Cool.
All right, so the next one we have, Joe, you're going to go on your stomach on the ground.
Okay.
These are known as Supermans, so what you're going to do is extend your arms straight out in front of you, legs flat and straight back, and you're going to lift both arms and both legs at the same time. Good, and back down. So initially we'll start with just a couple reps up and down, activating the muscles in the lower back here, the spinal extensors. If you want to add some challenge here, you could hold at the top for about 5 to 10 minutes. No, 5 to 10 seconds should be good enough.
10 minutes. That would be a whole workout. That's it. It's over.
Good. Back. All right, so to progress that last one, the Supermans, we're going to do what's called a bird dog. So you're going to get on all fours. From here, we're going to, again, try to maintain a stable, neutral spine. You're going to extend one arm. So if you're extending your left arm, you're also going to extend the right leg at the same time. Good. And you can alternate, so now you can switch to the other side. And this is a good way to challenge that core and trunk stability in multiple planes. So, we have the sagittal plane working, rotational plane. And again, to try to progress this one again, you can hold and come back in. Nice job.
I'm going to be honest, I didn't know the name of that exercise. I always just called it extend and reach.
Yeah, bird dogs. I don't know how it got the name, but that's what they go by. All right, Joe, so this last and final stage is going to be the return to sport phase or return to lifting, whatever that is. What we want to really focus on here is identifying triggers that still cause us our back pain and then modifying those triggers so that we can still get some training in while we let the initial or the end stages of healing occur. So what we can do is modify activities such as back squat. If a back squat is still kind of causing you some irritation in the lower back, you can switch that to a front squat, get a more upright torso. That might just be a little easier to tolerate if you still have back pain. If those are still intolerable, still causing you some pain, one I love to program is belt squats. This takes the axial load off of the back and the lower back structures, and it now puts the weight below the waist, so you can still get a good leg training day, a good stimulus without causing any irritation to the back. All right, another way I like to modify activity working around back pain is switching from double leg activities to single leg activities. So the way this helps is it allows us to have less of an external load and still get the same training stimulus. So working on the single leg, you get balance, you get stability, and you're able to still get a good training stimulus without so much weight.
Okay, what exercises do you do for the single leg stuff?
Typically, I like to do single leg squats. If you can do those, either assisted or non-assisted, wherever you're at with those. Step ups, and step ups are great because you can use a kettlebell in like a goblet position or two at your sides to give you some extra load. And then I like to do frontal plane movements such as lateral lunges, just to work on multiple planes again, make sure we're solidifying every way that we can.
All right, guys, we just finished up our 3-part series and our full video on back issues that you may or may not have and some exercises to correct it. I want to thank Nick.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, man, this was an awesome video. We're going to do more. Keep watching Mobilize It. Keep sharing, liking, and commenting, and we'll see you next time for another edition of Mobilize It.